Hello everyone, I'm Meghan Sullivan and welcome to History in Games, an audio and video podcast where I play video games and talk about the real history hidden inside our favorite games. Today I wanted to talk about The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, developed and published by Nintendo for the Nintendo Switch. If you like this video and learned anything cool by watching or listening to it, please feel free to share the link so other people can learn cool facts about The Legend of Zelda. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe and click that little bell for updates. And if you do, I'll be sure to keep the history and games coming. Thank you. So in my 3-part History and Games series on Breath of the Wild, I explained how many of the locations, enemies, and objects in that game are inspired by ancient Japanese history, particularly the Jomon era of Japan, which started around 14,000 BCE and lasted until about 300 BCE. If you haven't seen that series, I highly recommend checking it out. It's really cool how Nintendo seamlessly wove Jomon culture into the game, specifically into anything related to the Sheikah tribe. And now Nintendo has created a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild called The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Which kingdom? Hyrule? Maybe. Probably. But it could also be a reference to an ancient kingdom from long, long ago. A civilization that has been alluded to in Breath of the Wild, but always shrouded in mystery. And that is the civilization of the Zonai. And like the Sheikah, the Zonai culture may have its origins in real-world history, and that is what I want to explore today. The word Zonai is a play on the word Nazo, which means mystery in Japanese. And the developers have been pretty tight-lipped about this mysterious civilization. All we really know is that they were a warlike tribe and, quote, strong magic wielders who vanished suddenly thousands of years ago. Evidence of their existence is found all over Hyrule. There are statues, towers, stone labyrinths, and mysterious spirals that represent their culture. And some of the Zonai iconography that you see depicts the powers of the Triforce through an ancient perspective. In this case, through animal totems. In Zonai culture, courage is represented by the dragon, wisdom is represented by the owl, and power is represented by the boar, which feels appropriate since Ganon, who is strongly associated with the Triforce of Power, is often portrayed in the Zelda series as a boar-like creature. But the animal the Zonai seem to have revered the most was the dragon, a motif you see everywhere in Tears of the Kingdom, a crucial detail I'll talk more about later. But even putting the dragon motif aside, we see other types of evidence of the Zonai being a big part of the story. For example, the Zonai stone labyrinths from Breath of the Wild are now floating in the sky, and Link can acquire something called a Zonai charge when he defeats certain types of enemies. Yeah, I'd say we're going to interact with a lot of things associated with this mysterious civilization. But what part did the Zonai play in Hyrule's past, and how will that affect Link in the present? Fans have already started speculating and have come up with some really good theories, including this one. We know the Sheikah are closely associated with the Triforce of Wisdom and the royal family of Hyrule, and we know their culture is represented by blue glowing technology. Meanwhile, Ganondorf and his followers, who represent the Triforce of Power, are always depicted in red. Since Tears of the Kingdom features a lot of green-looking magic, some fans have speculated that Link's new powers, including Recall, Ultra Hand, Fuse, and Ascend, are related to the magic of the warlike Zonai, whose purpose in Hyrule may be to guard the Triforce of Courage and Hyrule's #1 hero. But this is just a theory, and honestly, it doesn't tell us much about the Zonai themselves. And it's possible that they'll always stay a mystery, that's what their name means. But is it possible that by looking at a real-life ancient civilization, we might be able to cheat the system and glean more information about the Zonai and their role in Tears of the Kingdom? I think it's absolutely possible, so let's go ahead and see if I'm right. If we look at the design aesthetic of the Zonai in both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, we can see it looks to be based on an ancient-looking culture, but one that is clearly different from the Jomon culture that inspired the design for the Sheikah. But what culture would that be? Well, upon further inspection and a lot of research, it's pretty clear that the Zonai are inspired not by Japanese culture, but the pre-Columbian cultures of Mesoamerica. And there's tons of evidence to support this right from the start. And I mean literally. In the earliest teaser trailer for Tears of the Kingdom, we see Link and Zelda exploring a deep cavern with stone artwork depicting some sort of ancient war. Notice how the pictograms have a very distinct geometric style, one that matches the geometric iconography of Mesoamerican art, which often depicted the history and cultural practices of various pre-Columbian civilizations. The art we see in Tears of the Kingdom looks to be doing something similar. By the way, keep this bunny-eared figure you see in the trailer in the back of your mind for later, because I'm going to circle back to her. At any rate, speaking of images, let's take a look at something else that seems to be a new addition to Hyrule: these massive glowing geoglyphs. You can clearly see them from the air, especially whenever Link is skydiving, and these geoglyphs seem to be a direct reference to a very specific Mesoamerican culture, that of the Nazca. The Nazca culture was a civilization that flourished from around 100 BCE to 800 AD on the southern coast of Peru. The Nazca produced beautiful ceramics and textiles, created sophisticated aqueducts, and most impressive of all, made utterly amazing geoglyphs, most of which can only be seen at very high altitudes. Some of these geometric shapes, known as Nazca lines, are the size of a sports field, and they depict numerous plants, animals, and even humanoids. They were thought to be made somewhere between 500 BCE and 500 AD, but nobody knows why these geoglyphs were made. Some think they were used as some sort of agricultural calendar. Others think the lines point to precious water sources. Another theory is that people walked along them in some sort of religious procession. Some think these designs were made to be seen by the gods. Others think they were made to be seen by aliens. But although nobody is sure what they're for, they're undeniably incredible to look at. And there's no doubt the Nazca lines are what inspired the geoglyphs you see in Tears of the Kingdom. But that's not the only bit of Nazca culture that may have found its way into the game. For example, the Zonai tribe's special crest or symbol is that of a large spiral. This spiral pattern is seen quite a bit in Nazca culture, and not just in the form of this nifty spiral geoglyph. You can also see this pattern in Nazca puquillos, spiral-shaped aqueducts that gradually descend downward in order to tap ancient subterranean aquifers and water channels. But wait, there's more! Notice that the enemies in Tears of the Kingdom really like to wear skull necklaces, and the Nazca were extremely enthusiastic headhunters. Oh, and Link's sporting tattoos? Well, the Nazca, along with other Mesoamerican cultures, did the same. But I want to zero in on one particular Nazca tattoo that caught my eye. On this gorgeous piece of pottery in the shape of a Nazca woman, you can see a marking on her leg that looks kind of like a coiled serpent. Why is this important? Because it kind of matches the coiled serpent we see in the logo of Tears of the Kingdom. The serpent is a constant theme amongst pre-Columbian societies, and as I mentioned before, the serpent or dragon motif is all over Tears of the Kingdom. But it's not just any serpent-like being that's being portrayed. As I'll demonstrate, the game's dragon aesthetic is closely tied to one of the most powerful deities of pre-Columbian Mexico, Quetzalcoatl, the rainbow-feathered serpent god associated with wind, rain, and creation. And I apologize in advance if I'm butchering these pre-Columbian names. It's through Quetzalcoatl that not only can we understand the visual inspiration behind the Zonai, but we might also be able to understand what Tears of the Kingdom is all about, which I think is really neat. But first, let's take a look at all the ways Quetzalcoatl inspired the aesthetic of the Zonai culture, and we'll start by revisiting a topic from earlier. Remember when we were talking about the geoglyphs you can see whenever Link is skydiving around Hyrule? Well, if you take a closer look at one of the geoglyphs, you can see it looks like a coiled serpent with feathers or a feather-like headdress. This image looks incredibly similar to one of the earliest representations of the feathered serpent deity of pre-Columbian Mexico, which dates to the Olmec culture. a civilization that flourished from about 1400 BCE until around 400 BCE. Now, scholars can't seem to agree on the importance of this particular deity in Olmec culture, but there's no doubt that the feathered serpent had taken center stage in the pantheon of the Olmec's successors. We know this because of impressive temples like this. This temple, located in the ancient city of Teotihuacan, is called the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, or sometimes the Temple of Quetzalcoatl, although the latter is not quite accurate since Quetzalcoatl is a later Aztec name for the deity. Other cultures like the Mayans had a totally different name for the god. It was built sometime between the 2nd and 3rd century AD, and what's unique about this extraordinary temple are the many stone depictions of the feathered serpent worshipped by the people of Teotihuacan. Notice the almost lion-like mane of feathers encircling the head, the exposed teeth, and the swirling patterns on either side of the serpent's head. You can see this exact aesthetic all over Hyrule. You see it on the top of this pillar Link is standing on. You see it on the wheels of this tractor trailer Link is joyriding. You see it on this flamethrower Link is using. By the way, fun fact, in Aztec myth, Quetzalcoatl has a twin who is associated with heavenly fire. What I'm trying to say is that all of this clearly points to early depictions of Quetzalcoatl as an inspiration for the Zonai dragon. And that's not all. Here's where things get really interesting. If we examine later Aztec beliefs about this feathered serpent deity, we can parse the meaning behind some of the images we see in Tears of the Kingdom. For example, the image of this bunny-eared female from the original teaser trailer threw a lot of people off. Why is a Viera from Final Fantasy in a Zelda game? But one rather ingenious theory I found on the internet postulates that since the iconography in the cave is similar to Aztec and Pre-Columbian art, it's possible this bunny figure is inspired by a story related to the Aztec god Quetzalcoatl. According to one version of the story, long ago, the serpent deity Quetzalcoatl visited the earth in the form of a human. While journeying across the land, he became extremely hungry but didn't see anything to eat. He then came across a rabbit, which kindly offered him to partake in the grass it was eating. Quetzalcoatl admitted that grass probably wasn't going to be enough to allow him to survive, so the rabbit actually offered itself up as a sacrifice to the god so the deity could continue on his journey. Quetzalcoatl was so moved by this incredibly brave and selfless gesture that instead of eating the rabbit, as a serpent deity might be inclined to do, he instead picked the rabbit up and gently stamped its image on the moon so everyone could forever be reminded of what a kind and wonderful creature rabbits are. Which brings us back to the rabbit figure we see in Tears of the Kingdom. Is this rabbit figure willing to sacrifice herself for the greater good? We don't know yet, but it's possible. And there's more. Quetzalcoatl is closely associated with the cycles of death and rebirth. According to the Aztec creation story, after 4 suns had been created and then destroyed in various disasters, a new 5th sun was created by the gods Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca from the body of a large sea monster, with one half of the body becoming the sky and the other half becoming the earth. The two then went to the underworld to collect the bones of humans from the last sun, so that Quetzalcoatl could then mix the bones of his own blood to start a new race of humans, making him the creator of the current human race. It should be noted, however, that this is only one version of the story. In other versions, it's other gods who help Quetzalcoatl, and in fact, much of the time, Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca were portrayed as enemies locked in an endless cycle of creation and destruction, namely with Tezcatlipoca indirectly or directly destroying worlds, while Quetzalcoatl helps to create new ones. Which brings us back to Tears of the Kingdom. Is it possible that the serpent we see flying around in Tears of the Kingdom is needed to help rebuild the land of Hyrule after a major disaster? Is it possible the dragon has an adversary responsible for the destruction of Hyrule that's attempting to stop Link from rebuilding the world? It's possible, especially since we know during the epilogue of Breath of the Wild, Zelda tells Link in no uncertain terms that it's their job to rebuild Hyrule after the events involving Calamity Ganon. But I guess we'll have to wait and see to know for sure. But one more quick observation before I end this episode, because it's pretty significant. Remember how the Triforce of Power is represented by the owl, the boar, and the dragon? Basically a bird, a beast, and a serpent-like creature? Well, if we return our attention back to Peru and look not at the Nazca culture, but the later Inca culture, we see a similar triad. the condor, which represents the sky, the puma, which represents the earth, and the serpent, which represents the underworld, although not in a scary way. To the Inca, the serpent might have represented death and rebirth, perhaps due to its ability to shed its skin. The Inca also believed in the Amaru, a double-headed dragon or dragons that were sometimes depicted with the head of a puma or jaguar and a bird. This being, or beings, it depends on the source, had the ability to traverse the upper and lower air and may have been associated with wisdom. And this two-headed snake-like creature is found in other pre-Incan societies around Peru, including the Nazca, who depict a double-headed serpent in one of their impressive geoglyphs, bringing us almost entirely full circle, or spiral. At any rate, it's pretty clear that the Zonai are linked, see what I did there, to Quetzalcoatl and other various beliefs and iconography of pre-Columbian cultures. But I want to know what you think. Do you agree? Are the Zonai inspired by the ancient cultures of Mexico and Peru? Could the Zonai be inspired by a totally different culture? Did I miss anything interesting about the Zonai? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, guys. See you later.